Good evening, Summa scholars. Okay, let's get right back at it. It is the next day. It is the Feast of the Presentation. I've been feasting. Just got back from Mass and just set the phone up here on some books. Let's see if it even stays. Got the candle lit and let's just zip through this. Okay, starting at the top of 253. Ending Article 1 of Question 23 concerning predestination broadly, moving into whether predestination places anything in the predestined. Let's finish this up at the top of the page. Although it may be said that every conferring of good above that which is due pertains to mercy, as was shown previously in Question 21. Reply to Objection 4. Even if by a special privilege their predestination were revealed to some, it is not fitting that it should be revealed to everyone, because if so, those who were not predestined would despair, and security would beget negligence in the predestined. It's just an odd flight of fancy to go down. It's an odd. I suppose it would do that. It is fitting argument. All right, let's just move into Article 2, whether predestination places anything in the predestined, and let's try to get to the heart of the matter and how Thomas differs from Mr. Calvin. Because when you say the word predestination, the perverse Calvinistic interpretation has been somehow so well promoted among the people that that's what people think you mean. So the word has been twisted and perverted in our minds. So when you say predestination, it's sort of like that scene in Fiddler on the Roof where Tevye is asked to go speak to the butcher about his daughter, but Tevye thinks they're talking about the cow. So everything the butcher says sounds ridiculous because Tevye thinks he's talking about his cow, when actually he's talking about marrying his daughter. It's sort of like that with predestination. When the word predestination is said, your mind hears this conglomerate of connotations which are very heavily influenced by our Puritan, Protestant, and Calvin ideas. So you can't even hear the word properly anymore. So let's see if we can straighten that out with Thomas's teaching. Whether predestination places anything in the predestined. Does God's predestination move the predestined like robots, or put anything in them at all? Objection 1. It seems that predestination does place something in the predestined, for every action of itself causes passion. Just so you remember, action and passion are Aristotelian terms that are technical terms. The hammer has action, the nail, passion. Action is something that's done, passion is something that receives an action. That's why it's called the Passion of the Christ. Not because he's super passionate, but because passion means to receive blows, or to receive some action. So because he received all the blows, the whippings, the nails, the thorns, the spear in the side, it's the passion, or the receiving of blows, or the receiving of action of Mashiach. Okay, so that's what he means when he says passion. So objection 1 from Larry is saying that predestination does place something in the predestined. Therefore, you know that Thomas is going to come and say it does not. Let's watch this drama unfold. Objection 2. Further, Origen says on the text, he who was predestined, etc., Romans 1. Predestination is of one who is not. Destination is one who is. And Augustine says, what is predestined but the predestination of one who is? Therefore, predestination is only of one who actually exists, and thus places something in the predestined. It's interesting. Of course, these guys are not going to be reasoning correctly, because they are the group that play basketball against the Harlem Globetrotters. These objections are made to be beaten. And that's what's going to happen when he does the reply to objections, and we'll get there in a second. Objection 3. Further, preparation is something in the thing prepared. But predestination is the preparation of God's benefits, as Augustine says. Therefore, predestination is something in the predestined. Objection 4. Further, nothing temporal enters into the definition of eternity. But grace, which is something temporal, is found in the definition of predestination, for predestination is the preparation of grace in the present and of glory in the future. Therefore, predestination is not anything eternal. So it must needs be that it is in the predestined. It is in the predestined and not in God, for whatever is in him is eternal. That's a little bit more of an interesting of an argument. Sorry, guys. I was long at Mass. They had an adoration thing afterwards. I haven't drank enough. I got to drink. Okay, objection 4. Wait, that's what I just did, yeah? Yeah, okay, so we'll see what Thomas says to that. We go straight to sed contra. On the contrary, this is Thomas's argument from authority. Augustine says that predestination is the foreknowledge of God's benefits. But foreknowledge is not in the things foreknown, but in the person who foreknows them. Therefore, predestination is in the one who predestines, God, and not in the predestined. Although, strictly speaking, it doesn't have to be God. There can be a predestination for anyone. And that is, so the etymology of the word predestined. Pre, of course, is before. Destined has to do with determining something, making a firm plan and a firm goal, and determining what you want done or established. So that if let's just break it down like a fraction, again, like Bernie Mac. If I am going to do a show, like my solo project or Sideshow Tramps or whatever, we're going to put on a show, and I have an idea in my head how the show is going to go, and we have a set list, and I know at the end I want the show to end up with this certain bang or this song, Lady Vodka or whatever it is. I know how I want the show to end, and to bring about a certain effect. Or like the end of Day in the Life by the Beatles, they know they're going to have that long sustained piano slam that just keeps resonating out. And if they had just done that, the piano slam, it wouldn't have the same emotional effect as you hearing the whole song, Day in the Life, and then finally getting to that sustained piano chord, or chords, actually. So that's in the mind of what did Thomas call it? Therefore, predestination is in the one who predestines. That's in the mind of the one who is predetermining, like the Beatles, like Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and the guys. They have a predetermined way that they want the song to make you feel and end. Just like I have a predetermined way I want my show to go, and I'm doing things to make that happen. The audience and the listeners may receive that influx dependent upon their clee, or dependent upon their vessel, or dependent upon how open they are to receive that experience. If they're in the back of the venue getting the drinks, or let's say they're intoxicated too much to even comprehend it, it won't resonate with them. Maybe they're in the bathroom talking to somebody, a friend, or catching up, or they're on the phone, or whatever. Maybe each person in that room is going to receive the benefit of that final end, that final goal of the last song of the show, Lady Vodka, or if they're listening to the Beatles, a bunch of people in the room, they're going to receive the Beatles' intention at the end of Day in the Life, dependent upon how much they paid attention, how insightful they are to music, how much they know music. The Beatles won't mean as much to them if they don't know music well. This kind of thing. So this is what Thomas is trying to say with predestination, that the final goal of God is predetermined, but each person has free will to create within themselves a vessel that is fit to receive it more or less. That's what he's saying with predestination. Calvin is saying that God determines who's going to heaven and hell, and they have no choice in the matter. Way not a Catholic teaching. When Thomas says predestination, what he's saying is the end goal is predetermined, how God wants the experience to end up, and then we all have the choice to open ourselves up to that final end experience, more or less, depending on our deeds and our actions. All right, let's go into the logical thing and hear him probably say something like that, except not using Sideshow Tramps and the Beatles, unfortunately. I answer that predestination is not anything in the predestined, but only in the person who predestines, which in this case would be God. In the other case, it would be me doing a show or the Beatles doing Day in the Life. We have said above that predestination is part of providence. Now, providence is not anything in the things provided for, but is a type in the mind of the provider, as was proved above in question 22. But the execution of providence, which is called government, is in a passive way in the thing governed, and in a way active way in the governor. Passive remembers passion. So the governor puts laws, and the people do in some way receive them in a passive way. Whence it is clear that predestination is a kind of type of the ordering of some persons towards eternal salvation existing in the divine mind. The execution, however, of this order is in a passive way in the predestined, but actively in God. Just like the receiving of the music is in a passive way in the receiver, but it's in an active way in me playing and the band playing on stage. The execution of predestination is the calling and magnification, according to the apostle in Romans, whom he predestined, them he also called, and whom he called, them he also magnified or glorified. All right. Reply to objection 1. Actions passing out to external matter imply of themselves passion. For example, the action of warming and cutting. The fire warming me. Let's bring the fire in here. Look at that. We have dramatic teaching aids. And cutting, the saw cutting the wood changes the thing. But not so actions remaining in the agent as understanding and willing. If I never think of the song, if I never create the song, it's always going to be within me. Predestination is an action of this later class. Therefore, it does not put anything in the predestined, but its execution, which passes out to external things, has an effect in them. Let's ponder that for a minute. I'm going to have to come back to that and think about something. It just made me think of something. If I was being completely clear on that. Also, I don't quite remember what the objection was. It seems that predestined does place something in the predestined, for every action causes passion. We'll circle back to it. Reply to objection 2. Destination sometimes denotes a real mission of someone to a given end. Thus, destination can only be said of someone actually existing. It is taken, however, in another sense for a mission which a person conceives in the mind. And in this manner, we are said to destine a thing which we firmly propose in our mind. In this later way, it is said that Eleazar determined not to do any unlawful thing for the love of life. Thus, that's in Maccabees for all you Protestants and evangelicals. Thus, destination can be of a thing which does not exist. Predestination, however, by reason of the antecedent nature it implies, can be attributed to a thing which does not actually exist. In whatsoever way destination is accepted. All right. I suppose we're talking about the providence of God and that he knows all the potentialities. And so he could have a desired effect for all potentials, and how they actually work out in space-time is dependent upon our free will. But right now we're talking about his predestination, which again is his, take away the term predestination. Just say, go with the etymology of destinare, I think in Latin, destinare. I don't know, but predestination is to determine something. So just say determined beforehand and take away the whole connotation and Calvinisty feeling of the word predestination and just say what God has determined beforehand is that we all be glorified and come to beatification. How that trickles down and how that takes place in the show depends on, as I said, the cleave that each individual person creates within themselves, the vessel, how they open themselves up to grace to receive the final experience. Reply to objection 3. Preparation is twofold: of the patient in respect to passion, and this is in the thing prepared, and of the agent to action, and this is in the agent. Such a preparation is predestination, and as an agent by intellect is said to prepare itself to act accordingly, as is preconceived in the idea of what is to be done. Thus, God from all eternity prepared by predetermining his goal, conceiving the idea of the order of some towards salvation. It's the order of some, not because he excludes some, but the order of some because the nature of free will is such that some will not choose it. Reply to objection 4. Grace does not come into the definition of predestination as something belonging to its essence, but inasmuch as predestination implies a relation to grace, as of cause to effect and of act to its object. Whence it does not follow that predestination is anything temporal. Predestination is, again, in the mind of the deity, just like the song Day in the Life is in the mind of Paul McCartney and Lennon and all the boys, George Martin, and how they're going to create it. Or when I want to come to the end of a show and Lady Vodka's the last song, I have a predetermined way I want the show to end. That's predestination, or determining beforehand. God has determined his goal in his heart and mind. Well, in his mind. And that is beatification, glorification. How much that is received by each person is determined upon their choice. My choice and your choice. All right, let's move into Article 3 and just get an objection, and we can move on and take on the rest tomorrow. Article 3 is whether God reprobates any man. Like Calvin said, does God choose who's going to hell? I'll give you a spoiler. No, he does not. It's just what I said. He's predetermined glorification. But he is also predetermined to allow people to rebel against him and not want to receive that. Objection 1, it seems that God reprobates no man, for nobody reprobates what he loves, but God loves every man, according to, thou lovest all things that are, and thou hatest none of the things which thou hast made. Therefore God reprobates no man. Objection 2, further, if God reprobates any man, it would be necessary for reprobation to have some relation to the reprobates, as predestined has to the predestined. All right, we'll get to the bottom of this thorny swamp. Why is he saying that it seems that God predestines reprobates no man? Then it must be that Thomas is going to say God does reprobate some man. Well, we'll see how Thomas means it tomorrow. Everybody, hey, I got to run. Adios, everyone. Sleep well. Remember, this is all straw. Go pray.